That was put in when the library was being discussed to be put out in that area. Village board members received hundreds of emails and phone calls and public comments from people that were really interested in protecting this part of the park. And even now, with the kind of current outcry over the cutting down of trees in J.C. Park, I think that there is a large portion of the village that is really interested in preserving and protecting and restoring these natural areas within the village. And in your packet, the village staff talk about all of the different plans that have been done for this area, and I'll make the comment that permanently protecting and conserving this area isn't outside the recommendations of some of those documents. The current Park and Rec plan has an objective that talks about this specifically. It's actually objective number 6 that talks about the preservation of natural areas for wildlife habitat and protecting the community's water resources, where I think this is really, speaks to that part. The habitat of this wetland ecosystem is very important. Things like frogs and turtles that use the wet areas some time of the year and then also use the upland drier areas, they need this space, and it's not interchangeable with another area. I know the Hermsen property gets brought up quite a bit as this will be future natural area that the village can use, but guess what? The frogs and turtles can't use that area. It is not the same, it's not interchangeable. And the fact that Netherwood and Jefferson roads are designated turtle crossing areas by the DNR kind of shows that this is a really important area for habitat for those kind of creatures. And finally, funding is available to restore this area. Dane County has a continuous cover program where they can fund taking land out of agricultural production and putting it into permanent cover, including native prairie species. And since this part of the park has been farmed over the last several years, it is eligible for that funding, which can give you up to $150 per acre per year for a 15-year period, and that payment is upfront. And they also fund $250 per acre for purchase of native seed. And within that total, that would be more than enough to purchase the seed to restore that area. And groups like the Nature Alliance is ready and willing to mobilize volunteers to help with that planting and that maintenance. So I think you have a really great opportunity right now with protecting and permanently conserving this area. It's an opportunity to do something really good for the community that will have lasting impacts now and into the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else like to make a public comment? Hearing none, move on to the next item. Item 5, report for the village officers. Director of Public Works is 5A in regards to the J.C. Park redevelopment project, phase 1.
Well, we have started construction on phase 1 of J.C. Park. The difficult first step is always clearing the ground and tree removal. That's been a very popular topic on social media sites and everything. We've been very, I think Park Board, Village Board's been very transparent about this project from day one and stuff, so, but it is hard when you see trees come down. But I want to rest assured everyone on the Park Board, you remember reviewing the landscape plans for this park. There are trees and many trees that are going to be planted, lots of landscaping and a lot of grass and everything. And so a lot of the things, the concerns that we've read about will be addressed and are being addressed already in the plan. So welcome any questions on that. The only thing I've noticed is, I noticed this afternoon already some vandalism of some of the barriers over the one bridge. We're asking people to stay out. It is a construction site. So it's disheartening. I think people kind of feel entitled sometimes, but it is a construction site. It's not a safe zone. We can't have people going through the construction area, damaging equipment, poking around, all that kind of stuff. So we just remind everyone to stay out of that area. Oak Street tennis courts and pickleball courts. those are, we've had a contractor under contract for a month now, but as you know, April was solid muck and rain, and so unable to get their equipment out there to take the light poles down. So that's actually, they're going to show up tomorrow morning, and I expect the poles to be down tomorrow, and we should have the courts open tomorrow afternoon, would be my hope and estimate on that. We did also submit I forgot the number now, I forgot the number, it was over $100,000 grant request to completely reconstruct those courts in 2023. And so that's a federal grant, and we're actually pretty optimistic about receiving it. And so if we'll be able to do that, we'll be able to completely reconstruct those courts, which have not been done since 1976 or 77, I believe, was the original dates. And then Dish Park grading modification. You'll see I have a memo in the packet that we can talk about just briefly. This is more just was approved at a staff level because there is not a major change, and the developers agreed to allow this to occur. The original grading, if you remember, this is Ridgeview Lane, Foxfield is up here. Called for a pad space to be back here. One of the persons who's brought this to our attention is Gary, is that right? Gary is here, and actually brought to my attention, true, that this probably area was not graded properly in the first place. So we brought that to the developer's attention. I know the developer's been working with Gary in kind of an alternate grading location that puts it a little farther down the hill. And you know, I think it's a fine location either place. But this you've talked to a lot of the neighbors. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but sounds like you've talked to a lot of neighbors and they're in support of this change.
Yeah, so I'm Gary White. I live at 591 Foxfield Road, right at that position right there. We've reached out to everyone in Autumn Ridge Phase 1 development. Of the houses that we've spoken with, over 25 of them have fully supported us, asking to move the park just slightly lower in the hill to make it a little bit safer for kids. Also gives parents the ability to be in both places at once between a park area and the future soccer field that's going in. So I have the signatures if you guys needed to see them or anything.
Yeah. So I appreciate you getting the information, because I think that's just confirming to me that the neighbors and people are in support of this, and Aaron's in support of this, so that's important, I guess. And so that's just kind of FYI. I didn't feel like that needed to be voted upon or anything like that, unless you feel differently. But that's kind of the summary on those three park issues. Any questions?
Anyone from the park board have questions or comments?
A couple of things. One, I congratulate you for taking the initiative on that, and because that's I think a good change, and will change the dynamics of that park for a long time. So that's a good thing. I did notice, Jeff, that the playground equipment will be put in. I think it reads after the seating is, and
We
have some
don't
growth.
have any budget for playground equipment right now.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'd be careful what you say in a meeting, I guess, sometimes. I was just out at J.C. Park the other day, and there's equipment that's coming out of there that's not in terrible shape. That would be perfectly fine. So I want to kind of evaluate the possibility of us being able to salvage that equipment, kind of take off the stuff that's worn and tired, and the slides, the climbing equipment, everything is in pretty good shape. So I don't know if that's something the neighborhood would be in support of, or if you're wanting for, huh?
We didn't go that far into the.
Yeah.
Just moving the.
It's just one of those things. It's not our expertise to dismantle those and reinstall those, but that's something I was going to be looking into in the coming days.
Thank you.
Just a clarification, those close lines mean that it's large pitch coming down from the road down to the flat area. So that was a comment that originally came from the park board, is that there wasn't a lot of space available. And so those close lines means it's a really great sledding hill, but not really a great place to land down. So I really appreciate the developer coming forward, because that was not part of their plan. And I know the staff went back to them and said, see what you can do. So I appreciate that.
And we've been told it's no greater than 4 to 1, which is
Okay.
a mowable slope for us.
Yeah, I did walk through there, and I thought, well, it's less than I thought it was going to be. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
reasonable, so appreciate that very much. Any other comments?
Yeah. Jeff, I was just curious, how long do you think the first phase of all the tree removal is gonna take at J.C. Park?
They should be wrapping up I think they were wrapping up most of it today and tomorrow. I would, most of the trees, I think, that are part of phase 1 have already been cut down.
So that what they need to do then is just clean up what's on the ground?
Well, they were up there cleaning up stuff around 3 o'clock this afternoon. They
Sure.
were cleaning up some of the stuff off of Oak Street.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
I do have one question about all the vandalism you were talking about.
Not all of it, just.
I know,
yeah.
but would you be putting up a fence also for that? Are you thinking on doing that? Because when we have fireworks too, we're trying to keep them all out of there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how to handle that.
So the snow fence, the one nice thing is we've got a big old wet ditch, mucky ditch that kind of provides a nice barrier for people. What we'll probably have to do is step up the fencing on the other on the southern bridge. We'll go with chain link fencing or something like that that can't be easily cut. If people want to get into somewhere, they'll get into somewhere. But we have notified the police. The police can ticket someone for trespass if they are, or if they're vandalizing any equipment or materials out there. A lot of the fences down, or there's a large section of that snow fence that are down now, but that was mostly due to the wind from the other day,
Okay.
not vandalism.
Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Great, very good. Moving on to item 5B. In your packet was great detail about the rules and responsibilities of park board members, as well as a bunch of other local government laws and how they relate to the park board as well. So I appreciate all that information shared. It allows some late night reading. But we do review our annual appointments, and so therefore, I think, I don't know if as a staff you administer that, or do we just do that entirely on our own? Look for nominations and.
Yeah, if you want to move on to the nominations for chair and vice chair, that's entirely your
I think that
decision.
was later in the agenda.
Is it later in it? I
No, it's right
apologize.
after, it's right after this one.
After this at item 6, okay. Did anybody have any questions or comments in regards to the information in the packet regarding the roles and responsibilities of the park board members? Nothing? Okay, very good. So that would be item 6 is communication and miscellaneous business for things that are discussion and potential action. It's like I jumped ahead, so that would be 6A, selection of chair and vice chair. So we'd be looking for nominations in regards to that. Any willing parties?
Are you willing?
I am willing.
I'll
nominate. Go ahead, Bill.
Please, Dave, go ahead.
I'll second.
Thanks. I nominate Mark Miller.
Thank you.
Serve as chair.
Is there any other nominations for the chair? Hearing none, let's call for a vote. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and same sign. Any abstentions? So moved. We also need a vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
I'll nominate Bill.
Anyone else interested, I'm more than willing to step aside.
Not stepping up for you,
Yes,
Phil.
not.
You don't want to do it?
No, no, I'm happy to do it.
Oh, well.
You know.
We would
you know,
need a second for the
I
nomination.
know it doesn't pay as much as his, but
no, half as much.
I'll second that nomination.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Any other discussion? All in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Thank
So
you, Phil.
moved.
Thank you.
We
Thank
got a
you
chair
all.
and vice chair. Item 6B, a request from a resident, Nick White, on the potential to utilize a dry detention pond adjacent to the Vineyard Park for temporary winter hockey rink. In the packet, there are some photos and some other information. Nick is here.
I am.
Again, name and address would be.
Name, rank,
great.
and serial number, yeah.
No, we don't
I
want
don't-
that in much, I don't want that.
When I looked online, I apologize, I only printed out 8 of these.
Here, I don't.
Fine, we can share.
We can share.
All right, perfect. You can share.
Thank you, Nick.
Nick, here's another one.
It's burned on my retinas.
Oh, he's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Rob. Name, rank, and what else?
Serial number, yes. Isn't that what they used to say?
My social security number
Yeah.
is. Nicholas White. I live at 1010 North Prairie Parkway. I don't really know what the process is for this, but what I'm looking to do is to build a hockey rink in the dry retention pond that is behind my house and my neighbor's houses, for the purpose of our kids being able to go out there and skate in the wintertime. We did it last year without permission, and I apologize for that. I really just saw that pond as something that never had any water in it, and it didn't really strike me that it would be an issue. It didn't cause any water issues, and it was awesome for the neighborhood. The kids loved it. The biggest battle I have as a parent these days is keeping my kids away from a screen. On a daily basis, I have to try to find different things for them to do. And this just creates an opportunity for kids to get out and do something other than sit and play Fortnite, which I have come to hate that game. And if you're a parent that has a kid that's between, I don't know, 9 and whatever, you probably don't feel differently about that game than I do. But it would be an excellent opportunity for these kids to just have something to do outside. Last year when we were out there, I mean, the pictures that I showed, first thing I included was just the parcel map, because I found it, and I drew a rough sketch as best I could using the DCI map from Dane County. After that, it's just the construction that we have of that rink. All we use is just a silage tarp that we throw in between all the boards. Real cute picture of my neighbor's kids learning to play hockey, learning to skate actually. They didn't know how to skate before this year, and the tall one, Finley, has gotten really good actually. Then my son and his buddy playing, my daughter with her eyes closed for a picture, but she's still wicked cute. My son, in this one picture, he is playing before school, which is awesome, because if he isn't outdoors doing something or with my wife or myself, he's just going to be playing a video game. We had a hockey practice there for my squirt team, because hockey time is a real tough thing to come across in Oregon. I mean, ice time is very expensive no matter where you go. And it's not like other sports where you have basketball or soccer where your kid can just go out and play with their friends at any given point in time. You know, most times they have to go out to the rink to actually be able to go and skate. And so this just opens up the opportunity that the kids have around here when they can go to their friend's house and play basketball. And then the last picture, I just thought I had to include that because it's absolutely an epically cool picture of our hockey rink. And it's kind of like the Field of Dreams for me, only it's the field of ice, that I'd really love to build again this year so that the kids in the neighborhood can go and skate again. And again, I don't know what the process is for this, so.
I'm not sure, Jeff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Twice.
So I knew Nick was kind of expecting my call somewhere during the middle of the winter, right? You know, we go back quite a ways and really good working relationship with he and his family on their properties and stuff. And, you know, I was out driving around in whatever it was, December or January, and I just usually trying to take notes of what's going on in the village, and I'm like, what is that back there? And so I found my way to Nick pretty quickly, and knowing him, I know he's always been very responsible with everything, and installed, you know, just when we've ever dealt with anything, he's just always been very fair and good to work with. So I do appreciate that. This has probably come up 3 times in my tenure here in almost 7 years, and The board has, in the past, I think the most recent one was the individual out on Ash Street that installs the rink kind of in their backside yard, if you know where I'm talking about, right? Ash and CC or Jefferson Street there. That person came to us asking to do the same thing, maybe do you remember that, Lisa?
It's probably been 3 years.
3 or 4 years ago, and at that time, the park board and village board, or one or the other, I can't remember who it was, said no on that. And I think one of the reasons, if this were just a park, and I actually had a young kid write me a bunch of emails last year wanting to do it over in Stone Ridge Park. And if it's just a park, my only concerns are always like, who's gonna pick it up in the spring and make sure it's taken care of, and you know, we don't end up with a maintenance nightmare, and obviously it kills the grass, but you know, I'd rather have our parks being used than just sitting there as nice big green spaces. The problem with this is that the function of this area is for stormwater treatment, and it's a dry detention pond for this area, and will get expanded upon as part of the Viridian development to the north. And we don't know, from what I've been told, is they don't plan to touch this pond or anything, because it's, they're having to meet whole different standards now than when this phase of Mary Hill was put in. And I expressed that to Nick, I think, when we spoke, is just, you know, the concern always is, what happens if we get a large rain on snow event, wood floats, plastic floats kind of stuff, and clogs an outlet and floods homes. I don't think that would happen in this situation, but you know, you just never know. And then you question, like, someone always gonna come out to you and say, why'd you guys approve that, or why'd you guys do that? So in parks, I don't have a problem with it. I really struggle with detention ponds, and what we've done in the past is when people have set out goals, because people will voluntarily kind of go off and clean areas of our detention ponds and set goals, and we've always just, according to our attorney, that's kind of falls under the, help me out here, Martin, but
Recreational immunity.
Recreational immunity, of, you know, they need to know that they're taking their own risk in their own hands, and, you know, if it's a pond. Now, obviously, you're not gonna fall through the, what is it, 3 inches of ice, or how many inches of ice do you get out there usually?
At the deepest end this year, it was unexpected, but it actually ended up being a foot.
Wow, nicely done. I mean, I have to admit, when I saw the pictures, I'm like, this is pretty impressive. And it's fun to see a community get together, because I think this kind of thing happens a lot more in Minnesota. I know with a lot of backyard ponds and everything like that, and of course Minnesota's very big into hockey and stuff, so I don't know. I mean, Martin sent an email out saying, you know, if it was allowed, it does effectively become a village activity if it's allowed on public land, and would fall under the village's recreational immunity for liability. You know, so it's not cut and dry. That's kind of, would you say that's kind of where?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different layers to kind of unpack with something like this. If the park board, I guess in this case, recommends allowing it, the village board would be the ultimate authority on approving it. We would probably just have to go through kind of a little bit of a due diligence process and making sure that the liabilities are clean. We want to make sure that if it's going to be in the dry detention area, that we're not doing something that could affect the performance of that piece of infrastructure. So I think there's a path forward. We would just need that direction from park board and village board. And the other piece of it too is, you know, it should go through, it's a development essentially, like any other development really. And so it should go through temporary use approval from the zoning administrator, that sort of thing. So there's just a lot of different layers that kind of need to be unpacked a little bit. And I guess what we would need from the park board, and ultimately the village board is this something you want, or is this something you're okay with? And then, we can do the due diligence to kind of put that into action.
We used to flood some of those areas behind the shelter slash bathrooms up there, and it was I remember, according to Gary, it was a royal pain, because the ground was actually more permeable than, they would have liked, and it was just hard to maintain. I think it takes effort out there to maintain it and drag it.
Yeah, and if I could just
Flooded.
interject for a sec here
Yeah.
too. The last year I think that was done was 2011.
Probably, yeah.
And that was the last year that Oregon won a state hockey championship at the squirt hockey level, which is 9 and 10-year-olds. And I'd really love to see that come back to Oregon.
Yeah, I think,
It is a ton of work though.
it is, and I remember, our staff was not, it takes someone who kind of works with ice, knows it, works hockey, and kind of has a better idea and that type of stuff. And, my guys could go out and blow the snow off and that type of stuff. But, and you've seen our weather around here. We may go for -20 for 4 days, and then it's 60 degrees for a week. So outdoor rinks are just hard. They're hard. But you can see how much fun they are. I watched the guy on Ash Street build his every year, and they have lights, and the kids are out there using it all the time. And I really applaud him for, the effort in doing that as well. So we've talked about whether we could move it up to Vineyard Park, just move it. Here, I'll just zoom in on, just so everybody understands the area we're talking about here. Okay, so this is North Prairie Parkway, the high school's down here. Well, this is the Lutheran Church back parking lot right here. This is Netherwood down here. North Prairie Parkway comes up, and then this is Vineyard Park right over here, and then we allow soccer and stuff to use this, and the girls softball use this. This is where Nick and his neighbors have set up in this area right here. I had suggested maybe as an alternate, right here. This has actually been cleared out a lot. My guys have done a lot of nice clearing out the brush and planting some trees and stuff. But that would be, in my mind, it takes out the threat of anything that happening to stormwater measures. And I think that's where I left it with the young kid I was working with last year. He started too late in the year to talk about it, but I said, we just need somebody that's gonna agree that in the spring, if it's not cleaned up, we can call and say, you gotta come in and have it cleaned all out and everything like that.
Can I say anything else? I don't know when I can
Yeah.
interject here, but
You can stand up and object, and we can, Phil, Mark will say you're out of order. And
do you have
slam
a
the
gavel over there
and-
too? You do actually. I see that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was thinking was just for a timeline. I was looking at the week after Thanksgiving. So that would be, I wrote it down on one of my sheets of notes, my scattered thoughts here. So after the 28th of November, I would go and start installing the rink if it's possible. And then I would look to be taking the rink down on March 27th. Or earlier, because some years you can just see that you're not gonna get any more cold days and the rink isn't gonna work. And it's not free when I put the water into the rink. Whoever created that retention pond and built it did an excellent job, because it literally, I mean, I've never seen a dry retention pond that just shifts the water out so quickly. It's been great. And last year we noticed as soon as we took the rink out, I pulled the plug, the water was gone almost immediately. With the snow blowing, like you talked about?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm not asking for whatsoever is any monetary help or any sort of considerations of use from anybody in the village.
Yeah.
I will take care of all the maintenance of it. And if it can actually fall underneath the recreational immunity, if we can put some signs up, I'd be happy to print those signs and post them all around the rink too. If it falls under that category, that would be excellent, because then it would, kind of release you guys of the liability, and myself as well, so that there weren't any issues if somebody gets hurt, because it's hockey. Things happen.
Yeah.
Mark, your kid's done a few things in his time.
Oh, yeah. Too many emergency rooms.
Yeah.
And Nick, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So are you intending, if you go forward with this again next year, is this just for private use, or are you intending to have it open to the public?
Every kid that's ever showed up at my rink, we have extra sticks, extra pucks. We've got a few extra pairs of skates. We'll let any kid skate there, really. I mean, I taught, I think, like 4 or 5 different kids how to skate this year out there. It was kind of fun. It's fun.
Are you finding out that the kids that were using it were just from your neighborhood, or were they from all over the village? Because it sounds like people that know about this, really
it was
into
primarily our neighborhood, but there was one kid and their dad that showed up, and I went out there and just tooled around with them for a bit out on the ice. That they had heard about it because they used to live in the neighborhood, and so they came over and skated. So it was kind of neat.
Sure. I'm just curious if there'd be any, type of schedule conflicts, if all of a sudden this was open to the entire, village, to use. You want to go out and have, you said you had hockey practice out there.
I did do that
said-
one time, yeah, and I invited the kids to the team I coached this year out there all the time. It's, kids are little, and this was a half-size ice rink, so there's a lot of space.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to work with the kids and just say, hey, let's go over here, let's go over there, or, kids find a way to sort things out on the playground for the most part in a peaceful manner. All the time, and when they're out there skating, they're just happy to see other kids out there. I mean, some of those days when it was negative 20 out, you just see me out there with a turtleneck on and a whole bunch of coverings trying to water the thing a little bit. Nobody was really out there, but the days when every kid was out there from our street at least, I mean, they just had a blast. The more the merrier is what I think of it. The more kids that are playing hockey in this community, I think that's that much better.
Sure.
Well, I think some of the action would be is to check in some of the liability aspects of it and just see what it is and take a step to see what impact that has. As we've seen before in park improvements where volunteers have done, the concern gets to be, does it become a burden on the staff? Something a staff has to pick up on. I do think there's something to say in the event that you can't clean up, so what do we do off of that? And what happens if the timing of March 27th doesn't work out? I agree that it's a lousy environment to have a year-long hockey rink outdoors. It just doesn't work real well. But it's a lot of fun once they get it going. Anything that can get people out, that's what our parks are about, to get out and do some things, and do something other than screens and other than sitting back. So anything you do that is positive, but I think we may have to be cautious and just make sure there isn't any other concerns for regards to the village. And I think that's our responsibility to the village board, is make sure we don't send something forward that they have to act on. Is that something we could inquire about?
So if this is something the park board is interested in, I think, and I just drafted up something here quick, I think a motion to recommend to village board to work with resident Nick White and village staff to evaluate the placement of an ice hockey rink in Rustic Vineyards Park.
Well, I think as Mark mentioned, we'd like to have the village attorney weigh in.
And I think the village board should authorize that work first.
Oh.
Because if they're not acceptable to this,
Right.
then we don't want to spend the money for the village
Absolutely.
attorney to do that.
I did have a couple questions in, is there expected construction on the end of North Prairie soon, or?
Likely within the next, year or so. Veridian has purchased the remainder of the Mary Hill neighborhoods, all those parcels that kind of go from the end of Mary Hill Drive, Perry Parkway, all the way up to the northern village limits. I know that they will be planning on that construction in phases. I'm not sure what that phasing map looks like. So it may be that this end of the neighborhood is first, or maybe the other end. And I guess, just to clarify your motion, would it be a rink within Rustic Vineyards Park or within this detention pond? Because I think I'm hearing they're two different
They're two different
spaces.
things. I was
and
gonna
so,
bring that up,
yeah, just
Thanks.
clarifying if it's not if the park isn't the ideal location, but the preferred location is the detention pond, I guess we should really explore that first.
So then, it'd be a motion to recommend the village board to work with resident Nick White and village staff to evaluate the placement of an ice hockey rink in Rustic Vineyards Park or the
Or-
adjacent,
Dry detention pond.
Yeah.
And I would say my preference is for the dry retention pond. I mean, however, given the water issues, it might be easier to get through the loops to have it in the park. But I have had an experience in the past where when you put a silage tarp out onto grass, that it ends up, it could end up killing some grass at times. So, you know, we went ahead this year and made sure that we went ahead and aerated everything and overseeded it after the fact. And the grass is growing back fine. But the previous year, when I lived on Jefferson Street, we had a rink out there, and I totally decimated the grass out there.
Yeah.
Well, and it was my house too, so I took my time cleaning it up. This year was a wee bit different when you gave me a call, Jeff.
Right, right.
Yeah, but Phil, I think regardless of the construction schedule, this area would still be, I think it's actually shown on their concept plan as sort of an extension of the park or a larger park, and then the dry detention basin would obviously remain to serve that function. So
Okay, that was
it's
really
not
where I
like
was
there will
going.
be homes right around that area. I think that the whole parcel is
Yeah,
dedicated to the public.
this'll be, this and going north will probably be all wet pond, would be my guess, over here. That's gonna be done to be able to accommodate, whoops, let me zoom out
And I
here.
think that's where they were showing their larger park on their concept
Possibly,
plans
yes.
too, yeah.
I asked him about that the other day, but, so all of this all of this is kind of a ridge, has to all drain right around here. And so I would see, you know, a very similar sized pond here. And when I talked to the engineer the other day, they said, yeah, we don't really wanna mess with this pond.
well, that property is dedicated for park and stormwater management purposes, so it would take actually a decision by a judge to unwind that dedication.
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's semi-permanent.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'm
Mark, I have
comfortable
some-
with the motion, you know, as is.
Andy?
I have some, just more comments, I guess. You know, knowing that it's village-owned property but not a park, just where it was. I know it was either a year ago or 2 years ago, some of my neighbors up on Ash Street put in a wiffle ball court.
Yep.
On that detention pond or the basin.
We made them remove it.
Right, because they had a fence and everything there, and you said they could mow it if they wanted to, but then there were some hurt feelings that they, you know, couldn't do it because they thought, you know, it's village-owned land, we can do what we want on it, so I'm curious, you know, obviously the precedence here is to say no, you know, right away with it, but obviously getting more information, I think, is a good thing with it too, and with this happening in the winter, where it's not an active growing season, or, you know, usually not an active rainfall season, makes it different as well.
Right, yeah, we run into this often, and we're struggling it with some of our dry detention ponds and areas that people kind of just encroach, you know, and they start putting things that are either semi-permanent, sheds, wiffle ball setups, horseshoe pits, those type of things, and I guess the question is, you know, if we would allow that, what would prevent us from allowing anyone to go out and set up whatever they want in areas? Parks is not a big of a concern because parks are just there for recreation. Like the wiffle ball thing is a major stormwater pond for up in that area.
Right.
So those again.
I mean, you find when people live next to open land, you're gonna take advantage of it.
Right.
I mean, not saying advantage is a bad, you're gonna make use of it, I
You're
guess
gonna
would be
make
the better
use,
term.
you're gonna make use of it, yes, and that's just about everything like that sometimes we call it generous landscaping, which we're addressing in one of our ponds right now, our dry ponds, where people have just continued to mow and continue to landscape, and we just have to eventually come in and say, you just can't do that anymore.
If it helps, I would be willing to mow this area for the entire summer every year if I can have this rink up.
This and the vineyard, Park.
Well, now, yeah, you're going a little farther.
And J.C. Park.
I'll
Does
tell
it
you what,
include your house
That's
too? Where are we
tell you
going
what,
here?
Yes, you mow the cemetery, you can do whatever you want.
No, thank you.
I think the big thing with the parks and placing things in them is, you know, the village enjoys a considerable recreational immunity from liability with its parks uses. But when you start using stormwater management areas, that becomes a whole nother ballgame. And if that use is going to affect what that thing is designed to do, then the village may be incurring some liability there. And so the village just needs to be very careful about that.
So Martin, what are you looking, I mean, I guess, what are you looking from the board? You know, just to say, yes, we'd like to kick this down the road to let the village board
Yeah, I think.
get more information?
Yeah, I think that's what this would do, the motion that I described would just make a recommendation, you know, again, presuming the park board here is okay with what's being proposed. Make a recommendation to the village board to work with staff and to resident Nick White to evaluate placement of a hockey rink in the park or the adjacent dry detention pond. And so that'll get kicked up to village board. If village board says, yeah, we think this is a great idea, then we can talk with the village attorney. We can maybe talk with, you know, an engineering consultant that we have to determine if it's acceptable, and then we would come back with information that, yes, this is good, or no, we have to tweak it, or no, it's just not good at all.
Okay.
Any other questions, thoughts? So we got a motion that's out there. Phil, are you offering
Yes,
a motion?
yes, I'll make
Do we have a
that.
second?
I'll second.
Per Martin's language.
Mhm.
Do we have any other discussion in regards to this?
So ultimately, this is not saying yes or no, we approve it, it's just get more information.
Essentially an advisory, and we're sending it forward to
Okay.
the village board to take the next step.
Got
Because if
it.
there's an expense associated with it, it's not something that we can act on it.
Sure.
Let's call for a vote. All in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. So moved. Nick, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you
providing
very
us
much for
supporting
your time. I
information.
really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Have a great time dealing with the baseball fields and all that.
Yeah.
Careful. 7, unfinished business, items for anything that would be discussion or potential action items. So 7A is a referral the village board had sent forward to the park board regarding a permanent conservancy on the West Park properties adjacent to the new library site. Last month, as well as in this packet, is the outline of the areas that was in discussion. So Jeff's put this up on the screen as well. So some of this is an existing conservatory area, but there's other areas with the advent of the library board and organizations that are talking about that, and it was presented. So is there any other discussion we offer up? You have.
Yeah, I can just kick it off here. And I know, like you said, Mark, this has been in the packet for the last couple of meetings. And I think Elise went over some of the information at the previous meeting. So essentially, in a nutshell, the library is going to be built out here. It's been designated, and the village board is considering taking the rest of, I guess, what we consider the West Side Park properties, the former Oregon School District school site, to be placed in permanent conservancy, which would just be for passive recreational uses. And so what we did to assist the park board here is we put together some historical information on how these properties have been planned previously, as well as what some of our current adopted policy planning documents, our comprehensive plan and our parks plan advise regarding this plan, these properties. So we provided some thoughts for the park board to consider. You know, ultimately, this may be the best decision for the property, but we do have some big planning exercises that are going to be coming up with the village, our comprehensive plan and the 5-year parks plan next year. And so our thought is that this would be a great thing to discuss as part of those planning exercises, and to make that decision within the whole context of the village's land use and the village's parks plan. And so what the park board is being asked to do here is, if you have a recommendation for the use of these properties. And that would be kicked up to the village board for their consideration.
Okay, thank you very much for offering and putting that thorough information together within the packet. Discussion from the park board.
Yeah, Martin, I read your memo that you sent out shortly after, the library was being cited there. And, thanks for going back and looking at all that historical information. A couple comments I have on it. I know since day one, or when this land was set aside, that it was set to be active recreation, sports fields and stuff. It's tried to happen numerous times, and for whatever reason, it hasn't. I don't know, some of that are reasons outside of the control of people in this room. But I think it's a great idea to, let it go back to the community. I mean, you saw with the library siting how much involvement there was there. And I know a lot of people were upset with how, where the library ultimately got placed. There's reasons for it, but when 80% of the people said don't put anything there, they don't want to see any development there, it's kind of hard to see, something get put there. So I think as you go forward with the next 5-year plan and some of these other planning things and master planning for the park, I think it'd be great to let the community be involved with that process too, because, things change. Different people are, move to the village, move out of the village, opinions change. And I think for the longest time, the people from the sports side of things have been the most vocal, but that's, kind of shifting now over the last year, as well. So I guess I'd like to see, the community be more involved as opposed to just letting a board, say this is what we want to do.
I would suggest that along the lines of what you're saying is that what Martin was suggesting is that we, rather than, go forward with this now, instead consider that we'll be looking at a new 10-year plan for the village and a new Parks and Recreation plan. And I think as part of that work, which the park board will be very much involved in, will be, a large part of that will be community input.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think we're on the same page in the sense that not to act now, but to incorporate not only what the wishes of the park board, but also the community to see how they'd like to see this used, rather than make some type of commitment for the property before we have a chance to evaluate in the overall plan.
Dave?
Are there gonna be, will there be limits to what can go there in terms of, will something not be allowed to go there at some,
Well,
or
I
is it
guess
pretty wide open?
right now, well, do you want to talk about the zoning and
Sure.
future land use?
Yeah, so currently we have a comprehensive plan amendment in the works for the property, the 6.9 acres that'll be the library site, and then the surrounding parcel, so we're just sort of redrawing property lines there. So institutional use will be what's designated for the library, and then the remaining lands will be in our basically parks, rural holding type use. So as long as that's in place, any type of development, if down the road, whatever, fire station wants to go in there, or housing or something like that, any type of change like that requires a comprehensive plan amendment first, anything that's besides parks and open space, really. So that sort of stopgap is in place if anything would go forward. There's also a lot of different ways, that a lot of different definitions of conservancy. It could be formalized in a conservation easement. It could just be a different way that it's managed. A few other things to note: the Lerner Park property is owned by the village, but it's been long maintained by the Rotary Club. They have the sort of looking for the next generation of their leadership, and in the meantime, I think they'll be looking to the village to help with some of the maintenance over there. We're trying to set up a meeting with them in early June here to discuss that, but there's been talks about doing sort of a master planning for Lerner Park as well. Obviously, this side of the park needs some discussion, and so I think it lines up well with our 5-year, Parks and Open Plan space, and community engagement is always a big part of that. And perhaps because there's been a lot of focus on these lands, we'll have some more focused sessions on certain areas of the village. We do know that there are some sports groups that have, kind of been counting on these properties in their planning, but they may have been, less engaged in the recent past. So I think understanding too, what is the need for those types of fields? If it's not here, where else can those be planned in the village? I think all those conversations tie together, and we'll be budgeting for that work for that park plan and the comprehensive plan for next year. So just trying to maybe maximize resources and time and not have all these separate processes running simultaneously. I think we could probably do it in the most streamlined way if we kind of wrap this all into that larger plan update next year.
As we exceeded into the 10,000 people community, the demands and growth continue on. And since this park board has a tendency of moving different people and not having as much of the experience, I think it's a great opportunity to take that planning opportunity, to bring all of that together, understand all the parks and what the needs were in the individual parks, and then bring it together. So it makes a lot of sense to let's gather more information, have the community get the input, and to start developing our park plan. And we can do justice for the village board as well, to do our work and get the right information for them. So I think that would make sense. So I don't think we need to take any action in regards to that. We can just.
I think if the park board wants to not make any sort of decision on the conservancy, the proposed conservancy, and instead wait for these other planning processes that will take place, I think that should be a motion
Action.
recommendation
Okay.
up to the village board.
Respond to the board's
Yeah,
request.
to a response
Okay.
to the board's referral. Yeah.
So I have a referral for that. So we look for a motion to delay the action and continue to gather more information through the planning process to be able to resubmit back to the park.
Make that motion.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
So if we do wait, I mean, I think this is maybe kind of what you asked. There's nothing they can't say, well, we're just gonna do parks then if the park, or not parks, like soccer fields or whatever. If we don't make some sort of recommendation other than to wait more time.
Right, well, I think I explained this last time, so in our comprehensive plan, all of our parks and stormwater detention basins all have this conservation parks rural
Mhm.
holding type designation, so it doesn't differentiate between active or passive use. Realistically, I think right now we're planning on extending, Jeff, the lease for the farmer for the
It's already
corn.
extended for
Yep,
this
so
year.
that's in place for
Yep.
this year. Obviously, any kind of construction, in a park, even if it's kind of a park use, if it's active use, comes to the park board, it's the planning commission, so not like anything is gonna, happen there overnight, and I know we're all, focused on getting the library project through, so, yeah, in terms of active use, I don't foresee any type of change in the near future. I think we'll definitely wait, that process we'll have a schedule, I imagine, probably later this year, and then kind of map out probably through early half of next year, a lot of those community engagement pieces, and then tying that into drafts of a plan that we'll review throughout the fall.
Yeah, I think it would be extremely hard for anything else to occur within the next 12 months.
Yeah, well, I just feel like we've been asked a lot and.
We're like,
Extremely
no,
hard.
yeah.
We're gonna wait.
And this board would be part of that discussion. If something were to come up,
Yeah.
you would have a say in it. And there are just several legal barriers to anything occurring before this process starts. For example, all of our land use decisions legally have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. So as long as that designation is in place, it's very challenging to do anything else there.
Right. I think also, even if we end up, going back to kind of a conservancy use here, maybe there's opportunity or do we want to bring in Lerner Park and kind of memorialize some of the plans for those properties in one larger conservation easement, or what other types of uses might be considered out here that maybe one type of conservation easement might not allow biking or something, for example, and so making sure that all the uses that are wanting to happen out there, or maybe there's future construction of small pavilions or, shelters, restrooms, et cetera, connect paths, making sure that all of those type of future uses that we still see as sort of under the umbrella of passive use in a conservancy would be allowed, and whatever kind of formalized language would be applied to those lands.
That's a good discussion point too, is when you say conservancy, what does that mean? And I think that's a good discussion for the village to have.
So we had a motion, I think Judy, we didn't get a second before we jumped into the discussion. So we have a motion on the table from Judy.
Could you just clarify what the motion
So
was?
so here's what I have. The motion and the second can verify this. So a motion to recommend to village board to consider the future of the West Side Park properties as part of the 2023 comprehensive plan and park and open space plan updates.
A second on that.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? We already covered.
I thought we had to discuss before we motioned.
No.
Sorry.
Comes after the second, so that's okay. Any other thoughts? Motion's down the road. All right, all in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. So moved. Thank you very much. Appreciate the information. That does help out. So 7B, consider renaming J.C. Park. So that was something that was brought up at the last meeting as well. Don't know if there's particular action on this. There's some discussion points that either staff or park board would like to mention.
We're advertising, but I don't think anybody's called Jeff yet, so.
I mean, we should wait until we're actually going to buy the sign, just in case somebody comes along.
Right, well, I think, this is one of those things that can be, I think, a fun project for the park board, because I wouldn't necessarily have to necessarily come from the sitting members of the park board. I think sometimes if you want to take it on as an option to seek names from the public, and that, and you're gonna get everything, some serious, some sarcastic, obviously, I think especially after this last week. It's really, it just is one of those things, we've called it J.C. Park from day one, just because that's always been what it's been, but we don't have J.C.'s in town. And this is a major reconstruction, park reconstruction.
I received a call from John Blanchard, who is the past chair of Park Board and been around for a long time as a Park Board. And he expressed concern in regards to this. He was not able to be present. He's got a conflict, so he couldn't be there. But he was involved when the JCs really developed that property. And he said they invested a lot of money and a lot of effort in developing that. And that property easily could have gone somewhere else if the JCs haven't invested as much as they did. Granted, the JCs, there's only a few left that were involved in that, likely because of the age of them. But it was a long time designation for that, and they really were instrumental in putting that together. And think out of he feels that we should really take some serious consideration, because those are the people of the founders of the village, and the founders have put it together. And granted, there's not as many around, but there still is. Great history, and there's a lot of history related to it. He did talk about that there's the JC East as well as the primary JC Park. He doesn't have any records, and I think that's partially what staff ran into. It's like, so what was the deal? And likely at the time, there wasn't as much written down, but he said they invested a lot of time and money to put things together, as in the parkour area, and they put a lot into that. Feels that it's something that should seriously be considered in regards to what was done in the past. And so he was curious what is the purpose of changing the name.
No, I think that's wonderful context. I think what prompted us to bring it to the park board was there was no JCs, and we found the old map that called it Central Park many years ago. So no, I think you state some excellent reasons for the context of that, and we certainly don't have to change the name at all.
Well, when I was help fundraising in the last 5 years, people were interested in having it named after them with money. But they're waiting, so I'm hoping Jeff will get calls, because they were just waiting to see if it was ever gonna happen before they contributed. Because we've been.
It's happening.
It's happening, yeah. So I'm hoping you know, somebody does come forward, but maybe we don't want to do that anymore. So I just need that, to know that if somebody's willing to give 250,000, would we be willing to change the name? I don't know that answer.
Yes.
Yeah. $200,000 to $250,000.
Because we did have it on the brochure.
Yep.
Right, right.
Be hard
And I-
pressed to back
I
up.
think you could do, I mean, you could do something like J.C. Park sponsored by,
Sure.
Oh,
Or
sure.
even a naming.
Whoever.
Right,
Mhm.
or some kind of, you know, historical informational piece that's out at the park too about here's who the J.C.'s were, this was the original plan for the park.
Yeah.
This is the work that they did is a way to kind of acknowledge their history. Just for, if I can make a comment, so when I lived in Virginia, in Charlottesville, I actually was on the park board there for a couple of years when I was in grad school, and I was there during the time that the KKK protesting happened in some of our parks that were named after Confederate generals, and so it was a really interesting time to live there and be on the park board. There was a process, though, to rename these parks because they were Lee Park and Jackson Park. And so I think what we ended up doing was the park board started with some suggestions, including keeping the names as is, but we came up with a couple suggestions so we didn't get kind of, you know, Mickey Mouse Park and things, everything under the sun, but we came up with, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 suggestions and then distributed a survey online, and it was open for a couple weeks for people to spend, and ended up becoming, I think, Library Park and Central Park or something, Market Street Park. So I feel like people had, you know, the opportunity to weigh in, but it didn't open the full can of worms because there was already a lot of sensitivity around those spaces. But that seemed to work well in a larger community, and certainly something we could share easily on village website and through other community groups too.
Just wanted,
I was just gonna say, I mean, I have a thought as far as naming goes, and I'd actually like to see a shift from naming parks after people. You know, I mean, if you look back at, you know, the history of our village, it's been predominantly white people, and a lot of the parks are named after old white guys, you know, for a lack of a better way of saying it. If we, you know, we talk about trying to do diversity and inclusion, you know, so by calling it Central Park or something else like that, you would, you know, to me, it would include more people, you know, with it, they'd, you know, maybe feel more welcome, you know, going to a park like that instead of it being after, you know, named after some person.
What about a company? What would you think of that?
I guess it would depend on the company.
I think the plan from day one of this whole entire park was if somebody came up with the cash to put
Yep.
up to make this thing work, their name was going on this
And
park.
it's on the brochure.
And it's on the brochure, so if
Be hard
anybody's,
pressed to back off on that. now.
I don't know how we could if it didn't happen. If somebody forked 250,000 to get this going.
You have to, it has to be voted to accept. There's a
Right.
whole agreement, and so like if
Right.
somebody, if some very controversial negative group said, we're gonna, I mean, obviously it wouldn't get approved by the village board or
Right.
anything like that.
I'm thinking more too that it would, like, a business would do it and it would be that type of
Absolutely.
thing. That
Sure.
would be,
Absolutely.
that I think was the goal of it, is to
Mhm.
hopefully get that person, which we're still hoping for. but,
Yep.
We're working on it, yeah.
Yep.
so maybe it's just a premature conversation at this point. We'll see.
correct, we have to,
We have time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not saying we can't put J.C. Park name somewhere else, you know,
Stay included in there.
yeah, stay there, or it could be was, or, you know, just a little thing on it like they did with that other park they,
Well, you have AmFam Field at Miller Park.
There you
So, I
go.
mean, it's,
Well, at the Wisco folks, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was, why can't I think of it name?
there was a family that owned it.
Yeah.
I
They
think I
actually
remember.
donated the land to us for the park.
Oh, on Braun.
Yeah,
Yeah, on Broad Street.
Kellstrom. Park,
Kellstrom.
thank you.
Kellstrom, there you go.
Yeah, Elvin Kellstrom Park, yeah, and that was land donated by the family. But, yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of time to figure it out. Maybe someone will step up, and, I mean, we still need, we do need donations, you know, to help complete the park.
Okay, item 8, new business, any items that would be discussion or actions. 8A was a review of the 2023-2032 Parks Plan Improvement. So included was the previous plan in the packet, Lots of information in there, lots of research. Always encourage the park board members to be familiar with the parks and find their way around. That was Judy's suggestion, let's get on a bike ride and ride all the parks. So it's kind of surprising how many parks aren't recognized, and there's been some great events that have gone on to get people recognized. And so I remember being in winter, ran into a mother and a child, and they said, we've never seen this park before. It was really fun. So they were doing some kind of event, but I think that's part of it, is getting familiar with all the parks and being prepared. Is there any other item that you were?
Yeah, so for capital improvement plan, so this is one thing that we talked about really about this time last year, kind of rebuilding the capacity of the park board and getting more involved with making recommendations for improvements to the parks. So the way that we do this in the village is through our capital improvement plan. And so I kind of did a little bit of a primer on what that is in the packet and what the process looks like. And so the park board's role is really to take a look at the next 10 years and start to populate those 10 years with things that it would like to get done, priorities and goals and things of that nature. And so in the packet is that 10-year plan. So right now it's looking a little front heavy because we've never done a 10-year plan before. So this is the first year I'm having the village's departments put together a 10-year plan. So that's what you're seeing in there, and most of the items are sort of hanger-on from this current 5-year plan. And so when we do the next 5-year plan next year, we'll start to see some of those things populate in future years. But as far as the plan looks right now, and for 2023, we've been talking about updating the 5-year parks plan. We've been talking about phase 2 of JC Park and making sure that we finish that project off. Jeff talked about the reconstruction of the tennis and pickleball court at Oak Street, possibly funded with some grant funds. I know, at least since my time here, we've talked about some improvements to the dog park. I added some funds in there as potentially to be used for that. The village board recently had a presentation regarding the Oregon Splash Pad project and whether the village would make a contribution to that project. So again, that's definitely within the purview of the park board to make a recommendation there. And then going out in further years, the next major kind of focus of what we just talked about was the master planning of Keller Alpine and the Lerner and West Side Park properties. And doing some sort of major improvement project there was targeted for 25 and 26. And then another thing that was in the parks plan and that we may want to revisit as part of that process was master planning the other village community park, which was the Kaiser Park, and that would be something that we could potentially focus on after the west side. Beyond that, I also put in some funds for just general park expenditures. A lot of our departments have anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 in their capital plans for just things that come up, equipment replacement, small projects, small upgrades, things like that. And I think the parks could really benefit from having at least some money set aside for, when somebody approaches the park board with an idea and you like it and you want to do it, or Jeff has something that occurs in the parks that he needs to take care of. I think having those money set aside is a good thing. So open to moving these things around, suggestions, things of that nature. That's definitely within your purview. This doesn't have to be approved tonight. It'll come back for the June meeting, and then we'll ask for the park board to make a recommendation at the June meeting, which will then go to the village board for review.
Andy?
Martin, the 2026, the $4 million for West Side Park, major improvements. I know you and I have talked about that in the past, but just to get it on record, I mean, it's seeing that number, it looks like something's been decided already, but right now it's just for budgeting purposes. Right. It's a placeholder, so regardless of which way it goes,
Right.
We want to set aside money for, whether it's sports field, whether it's conservancy,
Right.
whether it's something else.
Yeah, we want to have a target, and my suggestion would be to shoot high, because if you just put, $500,000 in there, and then the park board or the village board decides it wants to do, a significant project, we're not going to be prepared to take that debt on at that point. We need, we have, several departments, multi-million-dollar projects in our future. We need to be pointing the ship in the right direction now, because if we get to that year and we suddenly need $3 million or $4 million, it's not going to be able to happen.
Sure.
We just don't. We have to be evaluating that years in advance.
Mhm. And also, I think conservancy use, like we talked about, could include a variety of different other
Right.
infrastructure and improvements and, plantings and all of that. So having that placeholder in, knowing that number could change, but.
Yeah, people just see that money and they look, they see the money that's being
What's
spent
getting
on
built.
JC Park, and it's $4 million, like, okay, well, that's sports field money, but
Mhm.
that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Yep.
No, I like the extra money, the general park, money as far as things, because there's a lot of things, like Mark said, a lot of people don't even know about all the parks in town, and, they could all use some love.
And as we looked at fees, and trying to kind of balance what fees that our parks could bring in compared to what the other community parks, that was on the table, something that we surfaced out. I was trying to figure out when the meeting minutes it was 2 years ago, because I have my documents, but I wanted to pull the meeting minutes out from that. But some of that is that people can use our parks without really having any fee associated with it. And some of our parks themselves aren't as functional for some of these events, whether it's a wedding or different things, because they don't have like restrooms. So some of that would be an enhancement for some of the parks, just to be able to have the community be able to use for different activities. So, and so this would give a little bit of avenue direction to be able to do some of that. You can identify in the park planning and stuff what areas, which parks would be appropriate for something like that.
And we'll have our new park and rec person by then.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the fee structure, we're hoping that that's a project that once we get the community services coordinator position hired around October-ish, sort of a fall, winter project that we can bring forward and then get something set up over the winter, so that spring reservations coming along, we can have that in place.
And I just received an email yesterday from someone who was expressing concerns. They were expressing concerns over J.C. Park and losing fields and stuff, but they were expressing concerns over startup groups for new sports and new groups, and concern over the fee schedules and how for a group that has no budget and, and I think we can work around that. There's plenty of flat spaces that are non-rentable spaces in our parks that are usable. I think the more concern is the stuff that gets heavy use.
Right, the facilities would have to be cleaned and
Yep.
equipment set up for extra tables and all that
Picking
jazz.
up garbage.
I think it's also an opportunity to realize that the village is a small part of what the school district does. And so much of what the village burdens is what the school staff and the students are involved with it. And so there is an opportunity that we could get involved with what's the plan for the schools. Because some of this land that we're talking about, with Viridian, that area, some of that's also going to be where schools. And so they're going to have some potential land that could be utilized as well. That's going to support the students, but also could be tied in. So
Right.
there's correlation that could actually take place in regards to that.
So-
And some of that is that long-term planning. What are the needs of the area overall? So I don't think we'll take any action in regards to this at this time, but appreciate the information. Do we have any other questions or comments in regards to that? Thank you much, Martin. I appreciate it. 8B, any items for the future meetings or any assignments? Is there anything out?
I just want to mention two things that popped in my mind. I should have said them earlier, but we will likely be in June scheduling an official groundbreaking for J.C. Park West.
June.
And we'll be inviting the park board and the village board, other people who've worked on the project for many years, the sports groups and everything like that to come out and
The community.
the community, exactly. And so we'll be looking forward to that hopefully in June. And then I forgot to mention that if you've seen the big old piles of wood chips out there in the parking lot off Oak Street, those are actually manufactured wood chips specifically for the parks, and those are being distributed to all of the parks. The play areas for, I think it was 2.5 inches, 2.5, 3 inches of new surfacing. And prior to doing that, we did put down a weed killer. So hopefully we're trying to get our handle on, we've had a lot of trouble with thistles, and so we really want to be getting better on that. So.
Is there a sign stating that there?
Yeah, because people think they can take them.
Yeah, so we shouldn't,
Yes.
I should
Yeah,
have told the
no,
guy
no,
with
no.
his trailer last night, don't fill it and leave.
No, we put up signs right away, said not for public use, do not take wood chips.
Did you get the license plate?
We actually did have that
No.
problem, about
Hmm.
5 years ago. And
I
we sat out for too long and people started just,
I think people will think
Take
that
them
it's
away.
there.
Yeah,
for
it was on
their use.
Facebook.
It was, yeah.
Yeah,
what, to come and get it?
yeah.
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 Yeah, well, I think that it looks
Just
like,
recently?
Yeah, last night.
it looks
That's
like
why I
it's a
think the guy might have
product
been
of it.
there.
No,
They-
that's all right.
Yeah,
Say-
they think it's from all the trees they're cutting down.
Right.
Facebook is not where people should get information. I'm gonna go on record
It's
saying that.
Facebook, come on.
Yeah.
It's all true.
How about adjournment on this stuff?
Yeah.
Call for an adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
That's, Andy can have it.
Andy gets, and Judy wants a second.
Sure.
All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, so moved. Thank you all.